So I'm going to do a quick share screen. And apologies for a bit of the background noise here. We're at a pretty small studio and everyone's quite busy. We're on a few deadlines at the moment. And so I dare say that we might have a couple of interruptions. Okay, so can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So I was having a chat with Will sort of last week and before that when he invited me to come and speak to you guys. And, you know, I love doing this stuff. I think it's really important for our community to get to know each other. I think it's really important that students have the opportunity to meet people in their industry and use that as a way to, I guess, find their own place. It took me a really long time to, I guess, decide where I wanted to be, and I'm still in this state, you know, of change, you know, at the moment. And I think by connecting with people and realizing that we're all human and that I am just a creative and I'm anxious and excited and I still, you know, want to do amazing work and I want to learn every day, I think that helps break down some of those walls. And, you know, you guys are more than welcome to come and visit me anytime, email me, reach out on Instagram, you know, all of that stuff. So this is that first step, I guess, in building that connection, you know, with your community. For those of you that don't know the company, you know, my studio, it's Skeehan, that's my surname. We're now a team. It started off with just me. However, we've now grown to a team. We're about 5 now, and it's a mix, you know, from production, industrial design, graphics, you know, marketing, you know, all the usual kind of positions that you'd expect in a very small company. But every person in that team is definitely a multidisciplinary designer, and every day is different. And I expect the team to kind of be really open and, you know, continually learning new skills. Here's a little shot of us at one of our old spaces. So again, today's presentation, I've got together some slides. Some are talking points for me to kind of keep me on track so that I don't ramble too much. And other ones are just images of some of our projects so you can kind of get a feel for, you know, what we do. But I wanted to start the conversation around a quote by Benjamin Hubert. He's a London-based designer and absolutely, you know, one of my idols and mentors. I've followed his career and it's gone through a pretty amazing journey, you know, over the last 15 to 20 years. But he's got this quote or this mantra, material-driven, process-led. And I really hung on to that when I was coming up through as a young designer and loved that quote and that sentence. And for me, it means that you use material processes, like you experiment and play with the material and you let that act of play inform, you know, creative opportunities. You know, so by stretching a fabric or by learning how powder coat actually works or by microwaving, you know, a piece of felt and then steaming it and gluing it, what happens in that process and how can you then apply that to, you know, potentially a new piece of furniture or a project. Here's a quick photo of some of our, you know, work. It's pretty clear from this image that, you know, we do a lot of furniture and that is our bread and butter. That's the backbone of the studio. We design 4 brands and there's one brand in particular in Australia, Stylecraft, that we do a lot of work for. But we also do custom, you know, projects and limited edition works and stuff that's more exhibition format that we'll take over to Milan or New York. And then other things are, you know, your bread and butter pieces that you might find in the foyer of your university, you know, or in the lobby of a bank. So these are some of the companies that we've done some work for, you know, Google and, you know, Mercedes. We've picked up a few design awards along the way, and then obviously Stylecraft, you know, there in the middle. I'd encourage all of you to at least just check out Stylecraft. There's some amazing Australian designers under their brand, and I can talk about them a bit later if you're interested and maybe the journey that I went through to, I guess, work with them. But again, another Australian company that I think has invested for a long time in the value of local manufacturing. So today's talk is a little bit of a breakdown of what I would like to cover. You know, I only want to speak for about 40 minutes max, maybe even a bit less, but I am absolutely open to you guys talking to me along the way, and we can do questions afterwards. But I want to talk about the process. I want to talk about a design brief and kind of what that means. But more importantly, today is about how do we learn, our mentors, a personal brand, and a little bit of the story of, I guess, how I got to where I am now. And I'm kind of leaning on Will a little bit to keep me on track here today and make sure I don't start rambling for an hour on the first slide. Okay, so the process, this is what I use to talk to a lot of our clients. It's these 4 steps that we use to describe our design process. Clients really love this because they want to know where they're spending their money and how am I going to go through and get a result. So we break it down for them into this discover, define, prototype, and develop. I think a lot of you would probably have experience in this process, but what I found for a long time, I didn't actually break it down into key sort of sections. Stage 1, quite often I'm very excited to get to stage 3, the prototyping, making models and just experimenting and playing. But as I'm gaining more experience in the industry and as we're working with bigger clients, that market research, competitor analysis, talking about money up front, finding out what your competitive opportunity is, that's really important. So we spend a huge amount of time on discovery and define, almost equal to our prototyping. And then the development, that's the gritty bit, that's the engineering and the launch and the art direction and all of the manufacturing. So here's a little look at some of our process, lots of sketching. This is a drawing that I've done of a folding chair that we worked on, but lots of pin-up material, pin-ups, and trying to be as collaborative as possible. Sharing ideas and just talking out loud is really important in our process. Here's a look at our software. I think this is a question I get a lot, especially from younger designers, like what software should I learn or do I need to learn? Here at our studio, we're running Fusion 360. That's in the top left there. I was trained on Creo, which is now called Pro Engineer, and most of the other people here are SolidWorks. All of those software, they're kind of the same. The fundamentals are the same. The reason why I picked Fusion, one, it's a little bit cheaper, and it's very intuitive and easy to use. And 90% of the projects that we design are furniture. I'm not designing a whole aeroplane. We're not engineers. So Fusion was perfect, and it's actually proven to be, I think, a really good, program for all of us. Moving through, we use Monday. That's a project management software. That's in the bottom left. All of the Adobe suite, for presentations, even the one we're on today. But in the bottom here, that's probably the juiciest slide out of all of today. That's a pricing sheet in Excel. And I actually didn't use Microsoft Excel until I was well into industry and in my career. And I wasn't taught it at school, but it completely leapt the company into a whole nother area, I guess, of understanding our costs, profit, all of that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely encourage everybody to at least understand what the word Excel is, and how to self-teach, that software. And if you need any advice or if you want a template, I'm more than happy to send you across some of the stuff that we have built up, over the years. Okay, model making, 3D printing, all of this stuff is, not uncommon to you guys, I'm sure. We try to do as much of that as we can. I love holding things in our hands. It's a beautiful way to talk to a client. It's a great way to kind of share your ideas and get something off a page. This is a commercial chair that we've designed for Stylecraft, all manufactured in Sydney, and designed to be, I guess, incredibly efficient in its manufacturing, and it's very price sensitive. It's supposed to be a very affordable commercial chair. We still want it to be beautiful and celebrate timber and be quite minimal and all about, I guess, the fabrics and the different types of timbers. Some more of our commercial furniture. This is obviously using steel and fabric. The shells all flat pack. This is the Hup chair. I'm going to come back to this. I'll cycle back maybe at the end of the chat, but this is probably one of the hardest projects that I've ever worked on, and it's still going. It's like 9 years old, this chair. I've made no money on it. It's just a huge money pit. It's one of those projects that has been there as a constant, and I'm it's a curse, but it's at the same time, it's a blessing. I won a lot of awards with this chair, and I took it to Italy, I took it to New York, and it's definitely a product that a lot of people think of when they know our brand. However, we've only made 20, and it still needs a shitload of work before it can be sold, through a brand. But I want to talk about that later, as you need these projects, even though they don't make money, there's other value adds and benefits to them for your career. Sketching, I couldn't sketch before I went to uni. I had to teach it. I had to learn it, sorry. And now I'm fortunate enough to teach it. And it was just practice. I try to think of it like learning a language, like learning to kick a soccer ball, like learning any kind of fundamental thing that I'd picked up through my life, like baking a cake. I'm pretty good at baking cakes now, but only because I've burnt so many and ruined so many birthdays with my baking ability. And I put sketching in that same category. Anyone can sketch, you just have to apply yourself and take the time and find some great resources to learn it. So this is the chair, which we'll talk about maybe later. Again, another cafe stool, lots of sketching, lots of prototyping. Okay, so the journey. Again, talking to Will about the meaty bit of this class. I think people like to know where you came from, where you're going, and kind of what that sounded like. Can I just get a check from you guys that you can still hear me?
Totally good, all good to go.
Okay, cool. So I put this slide together, and I just did this the other day to kind of hopefully just have maybe an aid to visualize the last 15 years. So essentially I finished in 2005, I graduated year 12, and there was a very real chance that I was just going to become a builder. Like I love Lego, I like making things, I was into skateboarding, I lived in a pretty rural community, and nearly everybody was going into a trade. I loved art, I did art at school, but it was never really celebrated. It was just sort of that thing I could draw, and it was always a bit weird. And I didn't know about university. I didn't really know anything outside of a little bit of what graphic design, was and fashion. And so rather than go and do a trade, I had to, do something. Otherwise, I would have got kicked out of home. And I came across a TAFE here in Canberra. I got direct entry into it. It was just a certificate in essentially art and sculpture. It's because graphic design had already had their cutoff for the year, and I didn't have a portfolio. And that was really that leap into what would become the rest of my career. Going to that first year of study opened me up to the process of learning something that I actually enjoyed and I was quite good at. I always did okay at school, but I never quite understood what it was for and where I fit in it. And once I went to TAFE or arts school, I've found my voice, and I had some amazing teachers that became my mentors and gave me this confidence to keep learning. So I did 2 years of that. And again, at the end of it, I was like, I'm not really sure, what I want to do. Most of my projects and assignments were focused around furniture and transforming furniture and quite a lot of art. And so I decided once I'd finished that course that I would go and work for a local furniture maker, because I thought that was a really interesting path to go down. And I was quite arrogant at the time. I thought I'd done enough study. I thought 2 years, I'm good. I was now, nearly 20. And I thought that's all I needed. I just need to go and work for someone, start making some money, and then I can start my own company. So I went across to a local furniture designer called Craig Harris. He'd studied in Tasmania. He'd done his master's there. He was already a celebrated fine furniture maker, and he'd set up a shop in Canberra. And I was his first employee. And I basically sat there for 2 years making anything that he asked and just being his workshop assistant. He taught me how to really make and kind of understand some of the subtleties around timber. And also I watched his business essentially fail. Like, he struggled. It was hard. And I saw firsthand how difficult it was. He was entering in design competitions. He was exhibiting Sydney. He won awards. He had a solo show. But yeah, it was really hard. And what I realized is that he was an amazing maker, and so many similarities between he and I. But what I was lacking is an understanding of business and a true understanding, I guess, of design. You know, I think I was a pretty good artist and creative, but I wasn't yet a designer. And I was also starting to kind of find other people in our community, other friends and people that are working. And I met a lot of architects. And these friends, these architects, sort of opened me up to industrial design. So cut to 2010, I enrolled in industrial design as a mature age student. It was a 3-year degree here in Canberra. And it, again, much like having that moment back in 2005, this was a complete, eye opener. It introduced me to new software, to proper design thinking, sketching, communication, and just the world of manufacturing. Like it was so broad, and I loved it. And I realized, okay, this is my path now. And I moved through that degree, quite quickly, and I met some amazing friends. And I definitely started to build up a community. The people that you're sitting with in your room, or at least talking to here on Zoom, this is your community. And I had designers that I studied with back then that are now all over the world, working on amazing projects, and we're continually helping each other. And it's also the first point that I started to build what I'm calling a personal brand, right? So this is where you can fail fast. You've got all these resources around you. Not only do you have friends that can support you, quite often someone is much better at rendering than you, or they're amazing at photography, or they can help you build a website. You've got a workshop where you can prototype stuff for free or like really cheap. So I just saw this whole place as this resource that I could just use and milk. And I did. I pulled every single penny out of that place. And I prototyped stools, and I did photo shoots, and I asked so many questions. Right. And so that pushed me to graduate, where I was really lucky to be offered a job at Breville in Sydney as a graduate. And I turned it down, which was pretty crazy at the time, I guess. It was an easy decision, but it didn't make sense, I guess, to a lot of people around me, because that was a really prestigious job for a young designer. But I was so focused on doing furniture and designing furniture that I decided to let that career go as a Breville designer. I felt like that path for me was pretty linear. I'd probably work there for 10 or 15 years, make a lot of money, travel around the world, and maybe design 3 or 4 awesome coffee machines. That's cool, but I could sort of see that path, and I was a little bit more interested in that unknown. And I was still, what I felt like relatively young and pretty happy to, explore and fail. So I still worked a little bit in Sydney. I picked up some consultancy work, but it was just contract and, a couple of days a week. I entered in heaps of design competitions. I got into none. I designed like furniture, and it went nowhere. It was so expensive. No one wanted to buy it. Like I helped out lots of local cafes, making stuff for them. And I just tried to build up this trust in our community that I was someone that people could come to solve a problem. Even if it wasn't this amazing design solution, I'd design a menu for a cafe, or I'd help them, install, a mezzanine or a staircase. I was just connected to our, community. If someone was installing a big exhibition, I'd be there. I'd be the first person there to kind of help them install and paint plinths and stuff. So I was definitely not a good designer. I didn't know what that was yet, but I was so committed, and I was just happy to be part of that. So I was saying yes to any project. I was still pouring beers at a pub. I was lucky to pick up a bit of work at the university, helping out as a TA in the workshop, and trying to make it each day. But then it started to shift. As I spent more and more time in that community, and as I started to really understand the market a bit more, I realized that there was a few kind of key players. And this is the same for any sector, whether you want to be a lawyer, a politician, a designer, there's key players in your field, right? And you need to start to identify them. And I was realizing this organically. I was starting to read a lot more books, and I was moving through I guess different stages of my confidence to present work. So essentially I came across a few companies that I knew I wanted to work for, and I started to set goals and start to, I guess, strive to pitch to them, which is something that maybe I can talk about, in a bit. But this part, this 2020, that's kind of now. It used to be school work. That was sort of how my cycle went. But at the moment, it's just sort of all in one. I'm still studying. I'm reading more than ever. I've got these goals to sort of, I'm reading 20 books a year. I'm trying to do my Masters of Business at the moment. I've got all of these other community engagements where I'm part of different boards and the DIA, and I'm doing exhibitions with like Dale Hardiman in Melbourne. So this is all about this overlap between work and study. And as you get older, I think it kind of blurs into one big bubble. Okay, so how do we learn? This kind of feeds into where I'm at now. I'm not at uni anymore. I've gone through that, but I wish I knew some of this stuff when I was studying. I thought that uni would just teach me everything and I'd just be able to kind of pop out that other end and start, making money, and it was so far from that it was a huge, wall to climb, and I didn't really understand what the real world was. But over the years, I've started to read some really interesting books. And a lot of these have been recommended to me, and that's why I decided to recommend them to you, because the only way I found out about them is because someone said to me, hey, you should check this person out. So I'm sure you'll get a copy of this presentation at some point, but take a photo of this screen, and I'd encourage all of you to at least look into each of those. That middle book, that MBA book, I've read that like 7 times now. And when I first read it, I had no idea about any of the concepts in it. It went way over my head. And I was reading it like it as if it was another language. But now, over time and perspective, I understand that book completely. Okay, so I don't expect you to grab these books and completely digest them, but these are the sort of things that you need to be, as a sponge, kind of pulling in. The one on the left is Purple Cow by Seth Godin, like an amazing marketing book. And most of the other books, in my list here are marketing or professional development, focused. Teaching us how to think. So that kind of segues me right into, mentors. I didn't really, like when I look at that timeline from 2005 through to now, I didn't really talk about the significance of mentors and what they are. I'm not sure if it's hard because we're not in the room together and I can't kind of ask you all, but the question I would ask you is, do any of you have a mentor? And what do you think a mentor is? And 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, I thought that a mentor was just something that a lawyer or someone with a business degree had, and I didn't really even know what they did. They just kind of look over and, help you, give you advice. But I think a mentor these days, especially with the last 2 years that we've had with, COVID and how open the world is and our community is through YouTube and Instagram and open universities, a mentor for me is starting to shift. So of these 4 people here, I only know one of them personally, right? And that's Ross Gardam there, in the middle with the glasses in the pink. And he's an amazing Melbourne designer. I'd expect quite a few of you to already know him. He might have even done one of these presentations. But he's now one of my, close friends, and we've travelled around the world together and had many a great kind of dinner and conversations about the industry. But when I first started out, he was just a guy in a magazine, and I didn't know him at all. And I had to kind of become friends with him. I had to find him and talk to him, and that was terrifying. But all the other people here, I've never met them. So on the left, that's Chris Doe. You can look him up on YouTube. He runs a program or project called The Future. He's a graphic designer and he's kind of talking to graphic designers, but he helped me go from charging, say, $2,000 to design a chair to $50,000, right? And I know that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but just by watching, say, 10 of his YouTube videos that are free, that are right out there now for anyone to watch, it shifted the way that I thought about how I price a project, about value pricing. I'm not here, for $25 an hour. I'm here to understand what the client wants and how much they're prepared to spend, and we do the work that matches that. Okay, so really interesting for creatives, and I encourage everyone to look at it. And then Seth Godin here, the yellow glasses. like the marketing guru, he inspired pretty much everybody in marketing today, and has written more than 40 books on the subject. His audiobooks are great because he reads them, and he's big on the conversation and the practice. So what I like about Seth is he talks to you about your own practice, and the idea of learning how to juggle a soccer ball. You can't just pick that up that day. It's the practice, and you do it every single day, and that ball drops and you fail and you continually fail, but that's the process, that's the practice, and that's the best part. And then eventually you can just juggle a soccer ball, right? And then you're on to another challenge. Okay, and he's a really beautiful writing style that breaks that down in a really supportive way. And then lastly on the right is Patricia, who's a European designer who's worked for Morosso and all these amazing brands, and is a beautifully celebrated, designer that uses color and texture and materials. And I just hope that one day, I can meet her or work with her. But she's one of my mentors, and I don't have to meet her. I don't even have to really know too much about her, other than, I think she's aspirational. I know a little bit about her career, and then I can use that to sort of help inspire the way I'll move through my own career. Okay, so getting to kind of the tail end, I guess, of what I wanted to talk about. I don't know how we're going for time, but I think it's really important these days to start to develop a powerful personal brand, and this can be difficult for some people to digest. And I know when I first started out, I was really shy, and I still am, and I get quite anxious about doing some presentations and talking to some clients. But you need to build up that self-awareness and that confidence. It's a big part of communicating as a designer, and you can be an amazing sketcher and really good at CAD and rendering, but you also have to present and communicate your work and share your ideas. But what I'm finding even more so now that we're living in this digital age is that the personal brand, is super critical. When I first came through, it was really based on reputation. If you knew me, if I'd worked with you, we'd build up trust. But now I'm trying to build up trust with people in America, or people in Melbourne or Adelaide, or even in Europe. And I'm trying to get them to know me, but they haven't met me. And they're doing that through my brand and through my personal brand. And it's because the world is now more competitive than ever, and it's so open, and we've got TikTok and, LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram, all of these ways for us to kind of share, our digital story. So I don't expect you to know what to do. I just want you to think a little bit about your personal brand. So how are you presenting yourself professionally? And what platforms are you going to do it on? And for me, really, it's mainly Instagram, now more LinkedIn, because the company's getting a bit bigger and we're being a bit more corporate, and also Pinterest. Okay, and they're the three areas that I like to play in, and I use that to kind of connect with people. And then also our website. We just spent a whole lot of money redoing our brand, because that's another great way for people to understand not just the brand of Skeehan, but then the personal side of me, and who I'm representing, and I guess my values. So please take this opportunity to reach out to those people, your mentors, to me, and build that connection. If you want to work for me, you've got to get to know me. You've got to connect with me. I've got to understand how you think. I don't care about your portfolio. Like, anyone can do an amazing portfolio these days. I want to know your commitment to our industry. What are your passions? Who are your favorite designers? Where do you want to be in 10 years? These are the things that I'm excited about, because I will invest in you then if you show that passion and that commitment. So back on the personal brand, it's sort of built on these pillars, right? And I'm going to talk about mine as an example, but I want you guys to think about your own. Okay, so a pillar is just the foundation, right? Like a pillar, like we hold up a house, with a pillar, or a column. And so we look at these circles here. That's just a diagram, I guess, for what's holding up me as a creative in terms of a personal brand. So Instagram, that's doing a hell of a lot, right? It's propping me up, and it's how I show everyone in the world and clients my process, my thinking, I guess our aesthetic. We've got a website. Then we've got traditional media, so I still try to get as many features in magazines and blogs, and we enter into heaps of awards. But then lastly, the other one is education. Okay, that's doing the stuff that I'm doing with you guys now, that's teaching, and that's connecting with the next generation. Okay, because I'm a big believer that you guys are going to go out and work for some awesome companies, and then eventually, well, I'm going to email you at that business or whatever, and we're going to work together on a project. You know, and this is about us kind of looking across these 2-3 generations of designers and working together. But the circles over here on the right, they're what I've identified as opportunities. So these are areas that I'm not doing that well. I think I'd love to do a podcast. I heard you guys did an awesome podcast the other week. Congratulations. I've been trying to do a podcast for a year, and I just don't have the courage to get it off the ground. So, that's amazing that you've done that. YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, so it's all about growth and understanding areas that you can kind of move into to connect with your community, and ultimately, build up a brand. So lastly, I think there's only a couple of slides left. It's just presenting your work. This is something I learned the hard way. I've always enjoyed presenting my work if I've got a prototype or a product or a mock-up. That's great. But the reality is now that people expect these digital presentations, and that's totally fine, but you've got to get really good at it. And so you have to learn the software, InDesign, PowerPoint, KeyShot, even Canva, doesn't matter. Whatever your kind of software is, start to master it. And, I really encourage everyone to build templates. The whole presentation that you guys saw today was basically templated. It's something that I'd built before for a different presentation, and I just changed the slides out. It's always got my logo in there, but it saves so much time, and it makes winning work or winning competitions or getting that dream job, building that portfolio, so easy. And practice makes perfect, right? I hated public speaking. I hated presenting. So early on, I said yes to as many things as I could. I gave talks in tiny little theaters, there was an event we did at a pub, and it was like a design talk 5x5, and I tanked it. I completely choked. I got super nervous and my face got really red and my hand just started to shake, but only my hand, just down by my side. The rest of my body was really still. And I was aware of it, and I spoke kind of normally, but my whole body was shaking. But the next time I was kind of prepared for that, and so you just go through this practice of presenting, and you have to put yourself out there to learn. And the last thing on presenting your work is document everything. There were so many exhibitions or prototypes or things that I did that I didn't take photos of. It's a lot easier now because you can pull your iPhone out and document it, but that is so powerful for looking back, on the last 10 years. And if you're looking to, let's say, get a new job or kind of make a leap into another company or travel overseas and work for a brand, they want to see your process and your depth. And if you don't document it, it's hard to prove. And collaborate. So I don't know if you guys are aware of the Friends and Associates kind of platform, in Melbourne. We just did a show recently for Melbourne Design Week. Dale Hardiman, he's a Melbourne designer. He's a owner of Dow Jones. He's also RMIT. I'd expect a few of you to know him as well. Essentially, Dale and I were competitors in the industry. We both run furniture brands. We didn't know each other at all, and he's trying to sell furniture, so am I. And quite often they'd beat me on projects because they're just awesome. But we met each other in Sydney, and we were kind of bitching about the industry and just how the little guys like us just don't have much sway, and how we're made to feel like we have to compete. And why is Dale a competitor of mine? He's just another young Australian designer trying to build up a studio. So we started a thing called Friends and Associates, which was just supposed to break down all of those walls. We would organise the exhibitions and do all the hard work, but we'd invite all these people in. And the whole point was to try and get everybody in so that we could chat and share secrets and talk about our community. Right. But again, this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the courage to try and to reach out and to genuinely collaborate and stop hiding behind, these doors. So I think this is last slide. All right. Have we got time, Will, for one more?
We've got as much time as you like.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll keep it quick because we maybe have some questions. But I put this slide at the end only because I found this image looking for when I was doing this presentation, because I knew there was a pic of it somewhere. This photo is from 9 years ago, and it was just taken after I'd finished making this thing. And to give it some scale, it's about the size of an A4 piece of paper. It's a little bit bigger. And this is when I first launched a cafe stool. I designed and made a cafe stool on my own. I was working at a pub. I was trying to make it. I didn't have a website. Well, I had a website, but there was nothing on it. And I had designed a metal cafe stool that was very expensive, but I thought it was awesome, right? And I'd made 10 of them, and I wanted to get into InDesign magazine because I'd been buying their magazine. This is before Instagram, right? And I'd been following their magazine, and they were the biggest mag in Australia and even in Asia. They were incredible. But I didn't know how to get into it. And I'd been emailing the editor and all of the editors, all of my stuff for months, everything. And I'd never get a reply. And so after reading one of those books that I sent you on that list, the guerrilla marketing book, there's a chapter in there that really resonated with me. And in that chapter, it talked about a designer that was living in London, that was trying to get a job in London, and was at a really competitive design agency. And so what they decided to do was get their portfolio, and this agency that they were applying for, is known for getting, hundreds of portfolios for a new position. So they put their portfolio in an envelope and they sent it on this round trip, around the world. They basically just pushed it out to a few different countries, and it went around and then came back to that studio, in London. So it left here only a few blocks away, but went around the world. So when it landed back at this place in London, it was beat up, it was covered in stamps, it had kind of marks on it and all this texture and some sticker from Russia and whatever. And it went straight to the creative director's desk. And if you're thinking about the creative director's role and what they're doing every day, okay, they're swamped. They don't have time to open up these, 200, 100 portfolios. Most likely a junior assistant or an intern and a shortlist. But if you send a parcel around the world and have it covered in stamps, I guarantee the person, right, in charge, they're going to open it, right? Because it's just significant. It's curious. And of course, they opened it up, and then inside it is just a normal portfolio. Okay, but it's that creative thinking to cut through and get some attention that person found to be quite valuable. So they got them in for an interview, and they ultimately got the job, right? Because they thought differently. It didn't cost them any more, but it cut through all the noise. And so I try to do the same thing for InDesign. They're never going to notice me. I was a nobody. I had a shit product, no website, no brand, no reputation. So I got a huge chunk of American oak wood, like this big. I put the InDesign logo on it, my logo, and then Let's Be Friends, and then put that little USB there that had like 9 photos on it of a cafe stool that my friend, a photographer, took. And I found Sophia Watson. She was the editor at the time. I found her name in the magazine. I found the address of their office in Sydney, in Surrey Hills. And I sent it, this huge heavy block express post, to Sophia. And 3 weeks later, out of nowhere, I just got this reply, from Sophia saying, "Hey Tom, like your stool, but what the hell do I do with this big block of wood?" Right? And it started a conversation. And she said very openly, "Tom, your stool, I don't really have a spot for it in the magazine. The photos are a bit, shit, but we love your work, and we've got this event coming up in like 3 weeks. You should come up and check it out. I'd love to meet you." And so I went up to Sydney and I met them and I started talking to them, and they invited me to then be part of another show in like 5 months. And so I came back to Canberra and started working on stuff. But it was only through kind of being a bit silly, taking a risk, but ultimately just trying to be creative and be yourself that I guess it worked. So that's it from me, guys. I'm going to get rid of this shit.